In today's episode, we delve into a chilling tale of betrayal and murder set in Brooksville, Tennessee, in April of 2015. This is the story of Ethan Caldwell, a successful real estate agent whose life was brutally cut short by someone he trusted most. Ethan Caldwell was a 45-year-old man living in Brooksville, Tennessee. He was a well-known real estate agent working for a local company called Highland Realty. Ethan had a big smile and a friendly personality, which made him popular with his clients and colleagues. He had a degree in business administration from the University of Tennessee and had been working in real estate for over 20 years. Ethan was married to Natalie Caldwell. Ethan and Natalie seemed like a happy couple. Ethan was Natalie's second husband, and he had a stepdaughter named Sophie Reynolds, who was 18 and in her first year at the University of Tennessee studying psychology. Ethan got along well with Sophie, also it seemed to the outside world. Outside of work, Ethan loved sailing. He owned a small sailboat named Windswept, which he often took out on Lake Serenity. He enjoyed spending weekends on the water, feeling the wind and the waves. His friends at the local marina remembered him as someone who was always willing to lend a hand and share a laugh. In the days before his death, Ethan was busy with a big property deal. He was working hard to close a sale on a large commercial property in downtown Brooksville. This deal was very important to him in his career. He was also planning a surprise anniversary trip for Natalie. He had booked a cabin in the Smoky Mountains and bought tickets to see a concert in Nashville. He even picked out a special necklace from a local jewelry store, Bella's Jewels, as a gift for Natalie. Despite his busy schedule, Ethan made time to visit the local coffee shop, Daily Grind, every morning. He enjoyed reading the newspaper and chatting with the baristas. His favorite drink was a caramel latte. On April 10, 2015, 2 days before his death, Ethan was seen at Daily Grind, smiling and talking about his plans for the weekend. He seemed happy and excited about the future. Ethan's life seemed perfect on the outside, but there were hidden troubles. His wife, Natalie, had been acting stressed and worried lately. She had noticed changes in their daughter Sophie and was suspicious of Ethan's late-night work meetings. Friends and neighbors had started to notice the tension in the Caldwell household. On April 12, 2015, at about 7:30 a.m., Ethan Caldwell's body was discovered. The person who found him was his neighbor, Harold Jennings. Harold was a 52-year-old retired school teacher who lived next door to the Caldwells. Natalie had called Harold, worried because she hadn't heard from Ethan since the previous night. She was out of town visiting her sister and asked Harold to check on her husband. Harold knocked on the door of the Caldwell house, but got no answer. He noticed that Ethan's car was in the driveway, so he decided to try the door. To his surprise, it was unlocked. As he stepped inside, he immediately felt something was wrong. The house was unusually quiet. Harold called out for Ethan, but got no response. He walked through the living room and into the kitchen, where he saw signs of a struggle, chairs overturned and broken glass on the floor. He followed the trail of chaos to the master bedroom. When he opened the door, he was met with a gruesome sight. Ethan was lying on the floor in a pool of blood. He had been bludgeoned to death with a hammer, which lay nearby, covered in blood. The room was a mess, with blood splattered on the walls and furniture. It was clear that Ethan had fought for his life. Harold was horrified and immediately backed out of the room, his hands shaking. He pulled out his cell phone and dialed 911, his voice trembling as he described what he had found. The 911 operator tried to keep him calm, asking him to stay on the line until the police arrived. The news of Ethan's death quickly spread through the neighborhood. Maple Street was soon filled with police cars, and curious neighbors stood outside, whispering to each other about the shocking event. Local news stations like WKTN and WCCC sent reporters to cover the story, and by noon, It was the top news in Brooksville. Harold, who had been friends with Ethan for years, was in a state of shock. He had never expected to find his neighbor and friend dead in such a brutal manner. He later told reporters that Ethan was a good man who didn't deserve such a terrible fate. The discovery of Ethan Caldwell's body marked the beginning of a complex and tragic investigation, one that would uncover hidden secrets and lead to shocking revelations about those closest to him. The police arrived at the Caldwell home quickly after Harold Jennings' 911 call on April 12, 2015. The first officers on the scene immediately secured the area, making sure no one entered or left the house. Soon after, Detective Laura Bennett and Detective Daniel Morris arrived to lead the investigation. Detective Laura Bennett was known for her sharp attention to detail. At 38 years old, she had solved many difficult cases. Her partner, Detective Daniel Morris, was 42 and had a reputation for his methodical approach. Together, they made a strong team. As the detectives walked through the house, they saw signs of a struggle. The living room had overturned chairs and broken glass. The kitchen had more chaos, with dishes scattered on the floor. When they reached the master bedroom, they were met with a grisly scene. Ethan Caldwell lay on the floor, surrounded by a pool of blood. He had been bludgeoned to death with a hammer, which lay nearby, covered in blood. The walls and furniture were splattered with blood, showing the violence of the attack. Detective Bennett noted the hammer as the murder weapon and ordered it to be bagged as evidence. The crime scene was chaotic and disturbing. The detectives and forensic team took many photos and collected samples. They used gloves to carefully pick up items, making sure not to contaminate any evidence. Blood samples, fingerprints, and the hammer were all collected and sent to the lab for analysis. Outside, neighbors watched as the police worked. The local news stations, WKTN and WCTC, were there too, reporting on the shocking murder. Reporters spoke to neighbors who described Ethan as a friendly and well-liked man. The media coverage added pressure to solve the case quickly. Detectives Bennett and Morris interviewed Harold Jennings, who was still shaken from discovering the body. He described finding the door unlocked and seeing the mess inside the house. His detailed account helped the detectives piece together the events leading up to the murder. By the end of the day, the police had gathered a lot of evidence but still had many questions. Who could have committed such a brutal act? Why would someone want to kill Ethan? The detectives knew they had a difficult case ahead of them but were determined to find the answers. The first suspect in Ethan Caldwell's murder was his wife, Natalie Caldwell. Natalie was 34 years old and worked as an accountant for a local firm called Tennessee Accounting Services. She was intelligent, meticulous, and hardworking. Natalie had a tough past. She became a mother at 16 and worked as a dancer to support herself and her daughter Sophie. Despite these challenges, she built a successful career and was known for her strong-willed nature. Natalie had recently noticed changes in her daughter Sophie's behavior and grew suspicious of Ethan's late-night work meetings. Friends and neighbors described Natalie as increasingly stressed and on edge in the weeks before the murder. Some said they heard arguments between her and Ethan. Detectives Laura Bennett and Daniel Morris brought Natalie in for questioning on April 13, 2015. Natalie appeared calm, but was clearly distressed. She maintained that she had been out of town visiting her sister Emily in Nashville. She provided photos and text messages to support her alibi, but the detectives still had doubts. During the interrogation, Natalie spoke about her relationship with Ethan. She admitted they had been arguing more lately, mainly about his work and the amount of time he spent away from home. She denied any involvement in his death, insisting she loved her husband despite their problems. The detectives asked Natalie about the night of the murder. She explained that she had left for Nashville on the afternoon of April 11 and stayed with Emily until the morning of April 12. Emily confirmed this story when the detectives called her. However, it was hard to ignore the tension in Natalie's voice when she spoke about Ethan and the changes she noticed in Sophie. The police also searched Natalie's car and belongings for any evidence. They found nothing directly linking her to the murder, but did find a diary in which Natalie had written about her frustrations and suspicions. These entries painted a picture of a woman under immense stress and emotional turmoil. Despite her alibi, Natalie remained a prime suspect. The detectives continued to look into her past, interviewing friends, family, and co-workers. They hoped to find a motive or any clue that could tie her to the crime. The pressure on Natalie grew as the investigation progressed, but she remained steadfast in her innocence. The investigation into Natalie Caldwell was thorough, yet many questions remained unanswered. The detectives knew they had to keep digging to uncover the truth behind Ethan's brutal murder. The second suspect in Ethan Caldwell's murder was his stepdaughter, Sophie Reynolds. Sophie was 18 years old and a freshman at the University of Tennessee, where she was studying psychology. She was known for her outgoing and sociable personality. Her friends described her as bright and ambitious, always eager to learn new things. Sophie had a complicated relationship with her stepfather, Ethan. It was revealed during the investigation that their relationship had evolved into a strained one. Sophie had been living with Ethan and Natalie since she was 15, following her mother's marriage to Ethan. While she initially admired Ethan and appreciated his support, their relationship had become more tense over time. Sophie was interviewed by the detectives on April 13, 2015, the same day as her mother. During her interrogation, Sophie appeared calm but was noticeably nervous. She claimed that she had been studying for exams in her dorm room on the night of the murder. She said she had no reason to hurt Ethan and was devastated by his death. However, Sophie's behavior and her strained relationship with Ethan raised concerns. Detectives Laura Bennett and Daniel Morris learned that Sophie had been having personal struggles, including issues with her grades and conflicts with her stepfather. Sophie's friends said she had often complained about Ethan's strictness and his controlling behavior. Additionally, some witnesses mentioned seeing Sophie leave her dorm late at night on April 11, which contradicted her initial statement about being in her room all night. Forensic analysis of Sophie's belongings, including her cell phone and laptop, was conducted to look for any evidence connecting her to the crime. The detectives found text messages and social media posts where Sophie expressed frustration with Ethan. While these messages indicated her unhappiness, they did not directly link her to the murder. Sophie's alibi was partially corroborated by her roommates and dorm staff, but there were inconsistencies in her account. Despite these inconsistencies, Sophie remained a suspect, but was not immediately charged. The detectives continued to investigate her background and motives, searching for concrete evidence to either clear her or implicate her further. As the investigation continued, Detective Bennett and Detective Morris focused on Ethan's business dealings and personal relationships. They examined his recent transactions and connections with clients and colleagues. They hoped to uncover any motives or clues that could lead them to the true perpetrator of the crime. The search for answers was ongoing, and the detectives remained determined to solve the case and bring justice for Ethan Caldwell. The third suspect in Ethan Caldwell's murder was Ethan's business partner, Jason Clark. Jason was a 40-year-old real estate developer and Ethan's closest business associate. They had worked together for over 15 years, building a successful real estate business. Jason was known for his sharp business acumen and his role in several high-profile property deals in Brooksville. Despite their professional success, Ethan and Jason's relationship had been strained recently. The two had been involved in several heated arguments over business decisions and financial matters. Jason had been pushing for more aggressive investments, while Ethan was more conservative in his approach. This tension had created a rift between them, with Jason accusing Ethan of holding back progress and not being a team player. Detectives Laura Bennett and Daniel Morris interviewed Jason Clark on April 14, 2015. Jason appeared confident and composed during the interrogation. He denied any involvement in Ethan's death and claimed he had been working late at his office on the night of the murder. He provided surveillance footage from his office showing him working alone. However, the detectives were skeptical of Jason's alibi and the timing of his whereabouts. The detectives also looked into Jason's financial records and recent transactions. They discovered that Jason had been involved in several risky investments and was facing financial difficulties. It was revealed that if Ethan had pulled out of their business partnership, Jason would have faced significant losses. This potential motive added to the suspicion surrounding Jason. Additionally, forensic analysis of Jason's office and home showed no direct evidence linking him to the crime. His fingerprints and DNA were not found at the crime scene, but the detectives were not ready to rule him out. They continued to investigate Jason's financial dealings and personal relationships, hoping to find more evidence to support or refute his involvement in the murder. The investigation into Ethan Caldwell's murder was complex and multifaceted. The detectives faced the challenge of piecing together the evidence and uncovering the truth behind the brutal crime. As they delved deeper into the lives of the suspects, they hoped to find the key to solving the case and bringing justice for Ethan Caldwell. As the investigation into Ethan Caldwell's murder continued, detectives Laura Bennett and Daniel Morris worked tirelessly to piece together the evidence and motives behind the crime. Each suspect had their own story, but the detectives were determined to uncover the truth. Natalie Caldwell remained a prime suspect. Despite her alibi and the evidence she provided, the detectives couldn't ignore the mounting tension in her relationship with Ethan. The diary entries revealed a woman in distress, and her emotional state added to the suspicion. However, after further investigation, Natalie's alibi was solidified. Her sister, Emily, provided clear evidence of her presence in Nashville, and witnesses corroborated her account. The detectives cleared Natalie of direct involvement, though the strain in her marriage and her frustrations remained evident. Sophie Reynolds, Ethan's stepdaughter, was also under scrutiny. Her strained relationship with Ethan and the inconsistencies in her alibi raised red flags. Sophie's nervousness during the interview and the messages expressing her frustration with Ethan suggested a possible motive. Yet, her dormitory roommates and the surveillance footage provided her with a partial alibi. The lack of concrete evidence linking her to the crime left her as a person of interest but not a primary suspect. Jason Clark, Ethan's business partner, presented a more complex picture. The financial troubles and the contentious business relationship with Ethan gave him a potential motive. Jason's surveillance footage from his office showed him working late on the night of the murder, but it didn't fully account for his whereabouts. Detectives found discrepancies in Jason's financial records, hinting at possible motive but lacking direct evidence. As the detectives continued their investigation, they discovered a new lead. Ethan had been involved in a private negotiation with a client, Peter Lawson, a wealthy investor known for his aggressive business tactics. Peter Lawson had been interested in a major property deal that Ethan had been cautious about pursuing. The negotiations between Ethan and Peter had become increasingly tense, and Peter had a reputation for getting what he wanted at any cost. Detective Bennett and Detective Morris decided to bring Peter Lawson in for questioning. Peter, a 50-year-old entrepreneur with a commanding presence, was known for his sharp business skills and ruthless tactics. During the interrogation, Peter appeared confident but evasive. He claimed he had no involvement in Ethan's death and had been traveling for business on the night of the murder. However, Peter's alibi was shaky, and his involvement in the case warranted further scrutiny. The detectives searched Peter's office and personal property, uncovering several troubling pieces of evidence. They found communication records between Peter and Ethan that suggested an escalating conflict. Additionally, Forensic analysis revealed traces of Ethan's blood on a briefcase belonging to Peter. When confronted with this evidence, Peter became defensive and struggled to provide a satisfactory explanation. Under pressure, Peter Lawson eventually broke down and confessed. He revealed that he had been involved in a heated argument with Ethan over the property deal. The confrontation had escalated, leading Peter to act out of rage and frustration. In a fit of anger, Peter had attacked Ethan with a hammer he had brought with him to the meeting. The murder was a result of a sudden and uncontrollable outburst, rather than a premeditated crime. Peter Lawson was arrested and charged with the murder of Ethan Caldwell. The confession and the evidence against him led to his conviction. The case, while tragic, was resolved, and justice was served for Ethan Caldwell. His family and friends were left to mourn his loss, but they found some solace in knowing that the truth had been uncovered. Detectives Laura Bennett and Daniel Morris were praised for their diligent work in solving the case. They had navigated through a web of lies, motives, and alibis to bring the perpetrator to justice. The investigation had been challenging, but their persistence paid off, and Ethan's case was closed with a sense of closure for all involved. As Brooksville began to heal from the shock of the murder, the community remembered Ethan Caldwell as a kind and generous man whose life had been tragically cut short. His legacy lived on through the stories shared by those who knew and loved him.